Great. Well, thank you very much for the second edition of Ahead of the Curve with Emily Soward. I'll let her focus on the content because she is the expert, and that is the whole point. I can get nowhere to exactly what these words mean at all. But what I really want to impress on why we're doing this series and what it has to offer is that there are certain industries at certain parts of their development where there just aren't very many experts. And the industry is so new that the cool thing is that the experts and the people who have established how we are now, the platform that we're now operating on, are still here and they're still young. And so what Emily is doing is she has already done this work. She has already established this industry. And now what she is doing is she is setting out to find the organizations that need this work directly and not just with her former very large employer that she used to work with and do these things through. But what she realized is that there are many organizations that need this help, and it's actually more fun to work directly with them as well. And so that's what we're doing here is we're bringing up a subject. Emily's going to talk about it deeply, and then you have an opportunity to ask some questions, have a conversation, and then understand how this leads into not only an interesting conversation about things that are happening now and helpful information to navigate those, but how to start working with us so that we can have a large impact at the organization that you're at. And so, Emily, take us away.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to kind of put a disclaimer in front of this, we do talk about material risk. We do talk about, in some cases, threats, weaknesses, legal cases, that sort of thing. So everybody needs to do their own due diligence. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. We talk about a lot, and I think to Anish's point, we talk a lot about material risk, and it's very hard to find folks who will come into your organization who have kind of looked at this space and who talk about things that are sometimes, uncomfortable conversations. My background and my independence and my firm's independence makes it so that we can focus on this kind of highest end of emerging risk, the uncertainty, the challenges here. A lot of people I talk to, even though the reports are out there, they're publicly available, oftentimes not even behind paywalls. They're not sure where to go to find the right industry reports, the right experts to listen to, and they haven't even heard that 72% of S&P 500 companies reported material risks from AI itself in the risk factors section of their SEC 10Ks last year. You say all that stuff to a really technical person who's not familiar with how the business works, and their eyes glaze over because they're not aware of how high up the visibility is in their organization yet for some of the risks that we're going to be talking about. So today's topic, we're talking about the Verizon DBIR report that just came out recently. We're going to be talking about a few top trends. My organization, Realis Solutions Group, we focus on this highest end of risk, the material risk, material weaknesses, material concerns that businesses have through briefing, risk assessment, and bringing in experts who are credible, capable of going to the courtroom with you for you. And so when we're talking today about the Verizon DBIR report, I know that I just said the R in the report part, but DBIR is kind of what we call it in the industry. So DBIR coming out is like Christmas morning, everybody gets to go read it. Some years it's great, some years it's not as great. But when it comes down to what it means for your business, these reports and this kind of like market intelligence, threat intelligence, what the financials are, what the financial markets tell us, those are things that are very hard to source. So we put that together in a business that hopefully you get a lot out of the presentation today and have brought some of your questions for us. Anish is going to talk a little bit about me, I guess, as your CEO and founder of Realis Solutions Group. And then I'm going to walk you through some of the topics that I think you should be paying attention to.
Yeah. So that's great. We're getting a feel for, exactly what this company is, and exactly, what the thing is that we're delivering. And I think it's really important to be really clear about that. because we are in the end talking about large, complicated things that can feel a little ethereal or can feel something like, yeah, sure, that's a problem in my organization that generally everyone has. And it can feel like that when you start at the beginning of the conversation, but by the end of the conversation, where Emily wants to bring you is something really specific. Yes, generally those are the problems in the world, but specifically, it's this person at your organization that is having this exact problem, let's say launching a product, or I'm trying to sell a product, but there's parallelization at the customer level, or whatever the exact problem is there, finding that and then saying, yes, that is why you booked the 20-minute meeting with us afterwards, is because in that conversation, we're going to go from the general to the specific, and then that can lead to where you can say, all right, it's this department is going to solve this problem with Realis, and we can sign that contract. Because also when you work with an outside organization, the first thing you want to do is build trust. And then after that, then we can accomplish larger projects together. And that's just naturally how humans and our companies work. And so when you're going back to your organization and you're saying, I really want to work with Realis, and they're like, well, what is it? And you're like, well, let me tell you about Emily's background. I'm not going to read all the words on this screen right here. But that is the sort of thing you're bringing back to them. You're saying, oh, when you go to DEF CON and you listen to a speech about this, that's the person we want to bring off the stage and into the company to solve that exact problem. Because one of the things to really point out about Emily's speaking career is a lot of times companies have to pay often about $10,000 to get on stage at a conference. Emily doesn't pay to get at the conference. Emily gets invited to the conference to be the speaker. And I think the really important part there to point out on what effect that has over time is that what she says has been very well tested. And so that's what we can see as having a long history of saying the right things, and people at all levels of the industry saying, that is actually really helpful to hear that at a conference, to see that paper, or to see the result of even just the infrastructure of the industry being built out with her work. So I just really wanted to take a little bit of time so that when you understand that you're bringing back Realis to your organization, you're bringing Emily back, and then when your teammates can see what Emily is doing, that a lot is the first round of building the trust that you're bringing in the right person that really can solve that organization. And that's what we want our next steps to be, is to meet with you further, come into your organization, and to start having a large impact right away. But we just wanted to give you the tools as well so that you could accomplish that. So back to you, Emily.
Yeah, we think of us like a think tank that can work for you. So we deliver clarity. We come in with risk services around regulatory compliance, emerging risk, threat intelligence, AI, advanced technology. I'm really excited about today, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm just going to jump into DBIR. Again, Christmas morning for threat intelligence, security, anybody who is like nosy professionally, as I am. Realis being born in the intelligence space, a company that's founded to bring kind of the foresight that large organizations have, that experts have, to be something that you can get. We're a think tank that does stuff and does it for you. So I'm going to talk about not really what is in the DBIR. I'm not going to pull out the statistics, and I really encourage you to read this year's. Like I kind of alluded to, some years are great. I think that, and I've been so excited reading the DBIR this year that I've read a couple sections, 4 or 5 times. I'm going to keep reading it through the rest of the week. It's going to be my reading material for a good couple weeks here, and thinking about it, and it's folding into some stuff that's coming out. I've also got some topics I pulled out, talking about counterintelligence, talking about information lag and how fast you can action information, and talking about how DBIR is kind of falling in line with some of the other industry reports around AI and adversarial advantage. Obviously, having been an independent security researcher, an AI researcher, product leader, all this stuff, somebody who's just professionally nosy, loves to go, form a hypothesis and test it. I'm really excited to see the kind of the coalescing of different groups around what they're talking about in AI. We're not going to just talk about AI, but we're going to talk about some of the kind of foresight space. So the three things to watch, and the reason I put the number 69 up here is because I have the most expertise in AI security, privacy, regulatory compliance, life safety, critical systems engineering, that sort of thing. And last year when I was reading DBIR, I was like, where's the AI? We've had news media reports even, right? Like the most public sources possible. Journalists are talking about AI incidents, this and that for years. Regulators are moving, everybody's moving. And in DBIR last year, there was one mention. Now, admittedly, I didn't personally count that. I used, like the find on page tool, but this year it was 69 mentions of just the phrase AI space after it. So you can tell when you're reading these reports as they change kind of year to year, reading between the lines, what are they starting to talk about topically? Using industry reports to inform your position is very important. This year's DBIR pulled in new sources. It's 22,000 incidents, which they comment is more than in the previous few years. I'm not sure if that's the most ever. I haven't gone and validated that, and they didn't claim that, so it may not be the most ever, but they've also brought in some new kind of sources. One of the things that they did this year was they started talking about how initial access, so the way that a threat actor will get access to your network, access to your resources, access to your computers has been broken out from just credentials to also include pretext. And I'm like, this is fascinating. They're also starting to talk about topics that the intelligence community would just call counterintelligence, counter espionage, and they're looking, they did directly mention espionage. They did have a nice few paragraphs about in a big black box call out that says, the military and intelligence community thinks a lot about what they call OPSEC. I don't know that Verizon specifically call it out as OPSEC, but about behavioral factors, policy, insider risk. We do have, I'm going to tease it for you, we do have some folks from the actual intelligence community who do enterprise executive protection and investigations that we've got coming up in the next few ahead of the curve series. So I'm not going to spoil the counterintelligence, counterespionage. I've got an expert coming in for that because we've been seeing a lot of this as well. People using generative AI to enhance their campaigns. There's this new category, pretexting, convincing the victim to do something, provide information. A lot of that is augmented with generative AI. I know there was a lot of talk a few years ago about how now the phishing emails just look great because everybody's an expert. My joke is that I always send emails riddled with typos. So I send the emails like a Nigerian prince. As soon as you get an email from me that's perfect, that's a fraud. I am joking here. But the second topic I want to talk about, besides how interesting and brand new it is to bring kind of counterintelligence, counterespionage really, really forward this year and DBIR is the lag. And specifically, DBIR called out that in their section under social engineering and under AI, where kind of some of this pretexting is being talked about. They partnered this year with Anthropic. I think that's where they got the 69 mentions from, is they're talking about it a lot more. I suspect that people besides myself, because I did email Verizon about this, and I did, reach out to a number of people at Verizon, mentioned, hey, like, this is not in line with what my expectations were. Like, usually I really rely on this publication. And I think that there's a lot more experts that are saying more than once in such a large report, a lot more about what's happening in AI, even if you don't have the data or whatever it is. So the lag on DBIR, they mentioned, given the rate of change in AI capabilities, it might be obsolete by the time the report is finally published. So they're talking about, in this paragraph here, defenders are kind of besieged by more use of AI by attackers. This is something we knew about. Realis, we talked about this at MITRE AttackCon last year. We gave the talk there about like how MITRE Atlas and MITRE attack frameworks and matrix and framework are used by organizations, and where there's some opportunities. But they're saying but they're not really unlocking the novel or rare attack services. And so Project Glasswing, we talked about Mythos last week, but you need to talk about it for your board a couple weeks ago, is all about vulnerability discovery. So the Glasswing project, looking at vulnerability discovery, DBIR has historically been heavy on, hey guys, patch your stuff, patch your stuff, patch your stuff. They're looking this year at how there's a slowing rate of defenders being able to patch and remediate. It's very interesting that in context of an accelerated rate of vulnerability discovery, we're also seeing a slowing rate of remediation. That's something to watch, in addition to kind of the bringing counterintelligence and counterespionage topics and themes. And then finally, the Soward. This is what I want to get to about MITRE, because I have my own bias, right? Like, this is research that I did last year, and gave my little talk about. So I'm gonna get on my soapbox here, and kind of compare some of the research in DBIR to some of the research that we've done as a firm, more forthcoming, and we've got some people coming out to talk about that as well. But we gave a talk last October, and we were talking about endemic, industry-wide global controls and inadequacies, right? So what we brought together for MITRE AttackCon was, here's how AI is really impacting governance. Here's how AI is, impacting organizations. What are the risks to address now? We have a little zine that we give out. I kind of screenshotted out of it, but we've been telling people how to understand AI threat landscape, what the threat actors are doing, as well as how to understand AI governance. You're not going to see a laser pointer here, but you get the point, right? So what kind of drives and characterizes what threat actors are doing with AI, and how that's impacting the threat landscape, as well as what do organizations need to do for governance. And we are really, really forward with this. And so it's very, and I'm going to say selfishly, it's very selfishly exciting to see that, our hunches and our curated research and our sorts of trend line that we were talking about is really echoed by the data that Anthropic provided. They had a 793 threat actors. But when you look into the report, and I really encourage you to read this section of the report, because it's very interesting. It's the first time the DBIR has obviously commented so deeply on AI. They're looking at trust and safety enforcement data. So these were actual enforcement actions. So if nothing else, this tells you that Anthropic, a frontier AI company, has done about 800 almost enforcement actions that qualified for this study. And of those, what they were finding is that the median was 15. There's as many as 50 techniques used from MITRE attack. So let me kind of unpack the frameworks and all this and that, because it is very confusing if you don't know exactly what I'm talking about. So MITRE Corporation is a government-funded institution. They do research. One of the things that they produce as a product is the MITRE Attack Enterprise Framework. The MITRE Attack Enterprise Framework has a lot of tactics and techniques and procedures that are used by threat actors to achieve all sorts of goals. So when we're talking about techniques, and we're talking about Anthropic's data showing 15 to 50 techniques from MITRE Attack Enterprise, that's saying that Anthropic's tools, Claude, et cetera, are being used, and this is pre-Glasswing, so this is not, Mythos, this is just the regular Claude, et cetera. So 15 to 50 techniques. So when they were finding we had significant enforcement action was needed, we were finding that of those cases, which is going to be a smaller portion of cases than they're actually seeing, right? Because if it goes all the way to enforcement action from trust and safety, that's pretty significant. They've actually caught them, they found it, they have enough data. So this is a small sample of probably what Anthropic has. That's important to notice. And that many techniques is kind of a lot of the threat actors' workday that they're they're able to automate with generative AI. So interestingly, this is a little tongue-in-cheek to say this, but somebody's getting productivity gains for sure. And here's the data on how. So last year when we were talking about this, we said that Atlas, which is not enterprise attack, right? The Atlas is like a separate matrix. It's very similar structurally to attack, but it's focused more on AI. There's a little bit of overlap with the attack enterprise thing, the framework itself. We were saying that MITRE Corporation provides 25 recommended mitigations. Well, we said it was a little bit, this always gets people to kind of move to the front of their chairs a little bit. And they're like, what do you mean? So I'll give it to you here is that a third of the techniques, so a third of the things that MITRE Corp says that threat actors do with AI have mitigation recommendations, but all of those mitigation recommendations are proven broken. Like we can find newspaper articles that say like, no matter which of these 25 techniques you use, there's evidence that someone out there has already broken them. That has made the news, or that there's a couple of them where the technique is usable and the mitigation is, you can evade it, you can break through it, whatever it is, with very little skill. So even the ones that aren't like proven broken in the news, and we don't even have to be specialists to notice this, there's just really not controls for a lot of the AI risks, and what threat actors are doing with AI exacerbates some of the risks as well. So that's kind of what to leave you on, as we're still looking for solutions. So the third trend to call out is obviously we now have some good data on what the threat actors are doing with AI. This is very exciting for all of us who, we don't celebrate disasters, but we celebrate having good information we can use so that we can get people to make the right decisions, pick the right strategies, and so on. So I encourage you to read this year's DBIR. It's very good, very detailed. I'm going to pass it back to Anish, but if you want us to come in and talk to you about any of your questions that you have, we'll start taking them now and answer anything you might want to know about DBIR, my thoughts, those three topics.
Great. Thank you so much. I think what's really amazing about that is, once again, these are the hardest problems. They and so it's hard to even define them. It's hard to, and I think one of the most difficult things is that when you find, we're calling them a consultant, when you find a consultant, most organizations are, not understanding why they need to bring in that consultant. And so even if we find someone that says, I totally see how you're going to start solving problems at the company I work at, that word can only go so far at times. And so what we're offering is, if you like this, if you think Emily has value for your organization, start with a free 20 minutes, bring your coworkers, and let's start to understand, what your problems are, what are the unique, ways that Emily can start to solve those. And then from there, we can start to build out a scope of what an engagement would look like. And a lot of what we're doing in that 20 minutes is, we're answering questions so that you can see that we really can be helpful. We're talking about, where in your organization can sponsor bringing us on, what a proper contract is, because when we give our initial scope, it needs to not be just, an idea of all these great things that we want. Our initial scope needs to be the way that your company onboards any third party. We need to get to understand that a little bit so that we can be easily absorbed into your organization and start to help. And so that's what we want to do with the next conversation with you, is to begin to understand a little more, how are we going to help your organization? What is the path? And then also, ask your follow-up questions. I think what we're really trying to do with this series and with having Emily be, so approachable, is that we want to show you this is what it's like to work with us. This is how easy it is going to be. But at the same time, Emily is really busy, so we can't just have endless conversations. We have to bring them into this format like a webinar, and then bring you into a 20-minute meeting so that we can learn how to build that scope and start to honestly win your business, because our first goal is to win your business. Our second goal is to do a really good job so that your organization comes back and says, I actually have a larger project that I need Realis to work on. So I just want to say, thank you to our audience for showing up, and then I can pass it back to Emily, and Emily can present a couple more ideas, or if there's any questions, she can take them as well.
All right, so the typical question I get about the kind of threat landscape here. I'm going to click really fast, right? We talked about what is the 2026 AI threat landscape going to look like? What are threat actors going to be doing with AI, and what is that going to mean for my organization? So we talk about there's a couple of talks online that are actually recorded at this point where you can go see me talk a little bit more about this. But we talk about how there's a number of conditions, and this was actually echoed in DBIR, around what creates the conditions, the kind of perfect storm for there to be an increased amount of risk to businesses. And so the first topic is the weaponization of AI, right? So we're using AI for threat activities. So in that kind of corner, what we're seeing is, and this is all echoed in the DBIR and a number of other industry reports. We saw the CrowdStrike's report came out recently. Again, all these industry reports are useful for informing strategy, right? Like they give you some numbers to kind of chew on and think about, is this apply to me or not? But they talked about how there's been an 89% increase in threat actors using AI for their attacks. I did some digging to find out, is that like we think they have AI and they're using it for sending emails, but they're not actually using it for attacks. And it turns out those are observed 89% increase, not theoretical, or not like, maybe the threat actor has AI that's, ancillary to developing attacks or actually conducting attacks activities. One example I give too about the dual use nature of this is when we look at the Anthropic espionage case, what they were fundamentally doing was a lot of reconnaissance. And so I use the example of myself and my co-founder, Mike, who we went to RSA conference, and we wanted to figure out who we should be talking to, which of the vendors there were going to be most related to our interests and that sort of thing. And so we took the entire vendor list from RSA conference, and we created some prompts around, some of the things we were interested in looking for. And we let Claude kind of become our channel chief there and figure out who we needed to go talk to. And that is exactly an example of reconnaissance. So it's not like there's the good guys and the bad guys, and the bad guys don't have AI and the good guys have AI, and therefore everything is good. We tend to think about the world in a very black and white way, the red team, the blue team, when it comes to cybersecurity particularly, but there really is no, and then we have the trope of the purple team, of course, but where everybody's getting together and helping each other out. But there's a lot less variance between what the bad guys are doing and what the good guys are doing. There's no real wire signature that's going to tell you, is this a legitimate use of Claude or an illegitimate use of Claude, except for, obviously Anthropic's trust and safety team has some specific things they're looking for. DBIR goes into that. Anthropic also publishes a little bit of information about that as well, if you're curious. They're also using it for conducting some of the lower level tasks, gaining operational efficiencies, upskilling lower skilled actors. This is a big theme that was that we talked about at MITRE, that we've seen a number of other organizations talk about, that's in DBIR as well. Understanding the volume of research that goes into a report as seminal as DBIR is annually means that there's always a lag. So it's not like This is a criticism of DBIR to get us such good research at the price point of your email address takes some time and coordination. So again, seeing that kind of come to be a more data-driven point increasingly over time shows that the weaponization of AI is still pertinent. The increased attack surface, organizations are pumping AI into everywhere that they can, and so there's a lot more to defend these days, especially as we start thinking about agentic and we start thinking about agent-to-agent communication. There's a lot of good conversations around that. The defensive capability gaps, I do have a couple of conversations I usually have on that. One is how do I train people how to use AI for defense? One is how do I defend my AI systems from attacks? So whether it's like a regular, a traditional attack or not, there are gaps where defenders simply just don't understand the new tooling. You work in an organization, you're not constantly in school, you're not constantly learning. The pace of innovation that's so exciting for developers is crushing for security teams. So there's also some areas where the tools just aren't ready. Like I talked about the wire signature. We used to be able to rely on like, oh, this network traffic looks good, this network traffic doesn't look so good. All traffic to an AI system, is it okay for somebody to be looking up like pictures of cats? Well, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not okay. DBIR talked about okay and not okay behavior, again, alluded to that kind of counterintelligence, counterespionage thing. But at the end of the day, it's all situation dependent. And then finally, that fourth thing, the kind of uncertainty, the fog of war effect, using military terms there. The lack of strategic clarity that folks have, simply because we have these endemic controls issues. We have no agreement globally on what the right risk management framework to use is, what the right control set is, how do we be secure enough, how do we be safe enough, how do we mitigate all the risks enough. It's very fatiguing. We're starting to see some of that be reflected, I think, in the fact that we're seeing a slowdown in remediation and patching at the same time as we're seeing an acceleration in reporting for vulnerabilities and that sort of thing. So I look at these kind of soft indicators, but you don't have to look at soft indicators. You can look at some of the reporting as well. One of my favorite reports to look at annually, comes out around October time, is the IC2 workforce survey. So this is a cyber workforce survey. Usually over 15,000 people the last few years. And they started reporting AI as a skills gap, a top need. 41% of organizations are saying they need AI skills particularly, but when you look into the report, there's other great discussions around, like, do we think we're going to survive incidents in the next 2 to 3 years? Less than a quarter of companies think they're ready for that. Do you have all the skills you need? Most companies are saying they don't. 70% of companies are saying they're seeing AI incidents. These sorts of figures and things like that help kind of tell the story that and the story that we see in organizations, but help kind of indicate to us that there's a broader ranging set of issues redefining the industry. So that sort of fatigue and that sort of lack of clarity is exactly why we exist. I personally consulted to about a third of the Fortune 100 on AI governance, and implementing new AI products. I've shipped technical product in every year that I have worked in my career. And that sort of visibility and experience, I can tell when these numbers are real or not. And this one's a pretty, I would almost say that it's low, but that's, again, my opinion. They do this study, and I like that one. So if there's no other kind of questions, topics of discussion, are we close to time? I could yap all day. I'm a huge yapper.
Yeah, no, at this point, let's wrap it up.